Well, it took us 4 weeks, but we finally meet Ezra. And what we're introduced to him as tells us a lot about not only who he is as, his background and all that sort of thing, but his character. But there's a lot implied that tells us about him also. So, starting in Ezra chapter 7, where it says, now after this. Well, after what? Well, after they'd finally, at last, finished building the temple and had dedicated it and had then finally celebrated the Passover, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, in this newly rebuilt temple. Well, after this, and then it says in the reign of Artaxerxes, king of Persia. So you have to do a little bit of digging, but that's about 60 years after this. So the first generation, they've done their work, and presumably the majority of them would have passed away by this point when Ezra, son of Seraiah, son of Azariah, son of Hilkiah, son of Shallum, son of Zadok, son of Ahitub, son of Amariah, son of Azariah, son of Marioth, son of Zerahiah, son of Uzi, son of Buki, son of Abishua, son of Phinehas, son of Eleazar, son of Aaron, the chief priest. So this is the first thing we learn about Ezra, is that he is directly descended from the high priestly line. It says, this Ezra. Every time I see this, I'm like, oh, that Ezra? Yes, this Ezra. Went up from Babylonia. He was a scribe, skilled in the law of Moses that the Lord, the God of Israel, had given. And the king granted him all that he asked, for the hand of the Lord his God was upon him. So you have here not only an introduction to Ezra, but a sort of a summary of chapters 7 and 8 altogether, because it goes on to say, there went up also to Jerusalem in the 7th year of Artaxerxes the king, some of the people of Israel, some of the priests and Levites, singers, gatekeepers, and temple servants. And Ezra came to Jerusalem in the 5th month, which was in the 7th year of the king. For on the first day of the 1st month, he began to go up from Babylonia. And on the first day of the 5th month, he came to Jerusalem. For the good hand of his God was on him. So here you have a summary of what we're about to read. That there's this man, Ezra, descended from the priestly line, who also is a scribe, basically a trained teacher of the law, who is granted unusual favor by the king. And did you hear the repetition? The hand of the Lord his God was on him. The good hand of his God was on him. This is a man who is peculiarly favored by God to do a particular work. And the summary doesn't really tell us the whole story. Naturally, it's just a summary. But it gives you that idea that this man, he approaches the king, he makes certain requests, he approaches the people and gathers them and takes them to Jerusalem as a sort of a second generation return from exile. And then we have verse 10. This really is the core of what we need to know about Ezra. That he had 3 things at heart. These are his 3 ambitions. 1, to study the law of the Lord. 2, to do it. And 3, to teach his statutes and rules in Israel. So his ambition, his heart was set not only on the study of the law, not even only on the obedience that he himself rendered to the law, but to teach others to obey also. I mean, God give us more leaders like this, with their hearts set on studying the Word of God and living it and teaching others to live it. But now we take a step back because we've had the summary, but there are certain important details we need to know about this. And the first one is the commission that the king gives Ezra in the form of a personal letter that tells him what he is to do, the resources available to him, right? And essentially tells others, this is what I'm sending this man to do, you help him, right? So starting in verse 11, this whole letter in the original text is in Aramaic. It's a government document. This is a copy of the letter that King Artaxerxes gave to Ezra the priest, the scribe, a man learned in matters of the commandments of the Lord and his statutes for Israel. That right there, you'll notice, repeats about Ezra. He was a priest. He was a scribe. He was learned in matters of the commandments of the Lord. So here's the letter he receives. Artaxerxes, king of kings, that was a typical Persian designation for their king, to Ezra the priest, the scribe of the law of the God of heaven. Peace. And now I make a decree that anyone of the people of Israel, whether priests or Levites in my kingdom, who freely offers to go to Jerusalem may go with you. For you are sent by the king and his 7 counselors to make inquiries about Judah and Jerusalem according to the law of your God, which is in your hand, and also to carry the silver and gold that the king and his counselors have freely offered to the God of Israel, whose dwelling is in Jerusalem, with all the silver and gold that you shall find in the whole province of Babylonia, and with the freewill offerings of the people and the priests vowed willingly for the house of their God that is in Jerusalem. With this money, then, you shall with all diligence buy bulls, rams, lambs, with their grain offerings and their drink offerings, and you shall offer them on the altar of the house of your God that is in Jerusalem. Whatever seems good to you and your brothers to do with the rest of the silver and gold, you may do according to the will of your God. The vessels that have been given you for the service of the house of your God, you shall deliver before the God of Jerusalem. And whatever else is required for the house of your God, which it falls to you to provide, you may provide it out of the king's treasury. If that were all, that would still be spectacular, but there's more. I, Artaxerxes the king, make a decree to all the treasurers in the province beyond the river. Whatever Ezra the priest, the scribe of the law of the God of heaven, requires of you, let it be done with all diligence. Up to 100 talents of silver, 100 cores of wheat, 100 baths of wine, 100 baths of oil, and salt without prescribing how much. Whatever is decreed by the God of heaven, let it be done in full for the house of the God of heaven, lest his wrath be against the realm of the king and his sons. We also notify you that it shall not be lawful to impose tribute, custom, or toll on any one of the priests, the Levites, the singers, the doorkeepers, the temple servants, or other servants of this house of God. And you, Ezra, according to the wisdom of your God that is in your hand, appoint magistrates and judges who may judge all the people in the province beyond the river, all such as know the laws of your God. And those who do not know them, you shall teach. Whoever will not obey the laws of your God and the law of the king, let judgment be strictly executed on him, whether for death or for banishment or for confiscation of his goods or for imprisonment. That is some letter. And the fact that it is written as a personal letter also to Ezra tells us a bit about how important Ezra was in not only approaching the king for this matter, but it implies something about his role among the captive Jews in Babylonia. You notice twice he was referred to as Ezra the priest, scribe of the law of the God of heaven. A lot of people think that this was actually a title that he carried, that he had a fairly substantial role in the community of exiles. which makes sense because not just anyone is in a position to get a project like this off the ground. Not just anyone is in a position to approach the king about supporting a project like this. So you can suppose through all of this that Ezra was already a fairly significant personage in the community of exiles. But it's also thought that he had some considerable involvement in drafting this commission. Because did you hear the language that is used? This is language of someone who knows the requirements of sacrificial worship in the temple of God. There's no way on earth that King of Persia, no matter how involved he may want to be in the governance of his people, would know all of this. But it isn't out of the ordinary to consider that a king would say, yes, I support what you're saying. Go ahead and draft a document for me. I have some counselors who can help you with this that says what you need it to say, and I will sign it. And the generosity of this. Now, we've already seen this back at the beginning. The decree of Cyrus, remember, where he's sending people back to their homelands and supporting the reestablishment of each people group's indigenous worship, you might say. So we've already got that as a standard that's set. And we have generosity too, where it's like this is reviving, almost expanding on the earlier decree. We don't really know what the amounts are of the silver and the wheat, the wine, the oil. What we do know is that it is considerable. And that's only half of it. We'll find later that the treasures dedicated for the house of God that the king and the counselors have donated, plus all of the free will offerings of the people who are staying out in their exile communities, we find that that's, let's say, some people think that it registered in the tonnage. So this document that Ezra is carrying with him has a lot of power behind it. But suddenly the text switches. And we have Ezra himself bursting out in doxology. Blessed be the Lord, the God of our fathers, who put such a thing as this into the heart of the king, to beautify the house of the Lord that is in Jerusalem, and who extended to me his steadfast love before the king and his counselors, and before all of the king's mighty officers. I took courage, for the hand of the Lord my God was on me, and I gathered leading men from Israel to go up with me. Right, so this is where we have from the summary, right, that he gathers a bunch of people of Israel, priests, Levites, singers, gatekeepers, temple servants, etc., to travel to Jerusalem. But here we also see that phrase pop up again. The hand of the Lord my God was upon me. Now, I don't know what it was, and we're not told at all, that inspired Ezra to make this journey. It's totally different from Nehemiah. We'll get that far in a couple weeks, and he's very obvious what stirs him to return to Jerusalem. He gets a bad report of the reputation and situation of the returnees. We don't get that from Ezra. Maybe he had gotten some sort of rumor that the people who had gone back the first generation hadn't had anyone to teach the people, and the people were not living according to the law of the Lord. Or maybe he, like Paul in the New Testament, having set his heart to teach the statutes and rules, was looking for a place where he could do so. Maybe he had done all that he thought that he could do. He had taught the exile community and set up teachers for them to carry on. And he was looking for new grounds to work in. We don't know. Whatever it was, it's a big, big thing. And as you get into chapter 8, and you're suddenly like, oh, a genealogy? Really? Do we have to? But I look at this and I think of a big old campground. I'll explain later why. And suppose you were one of the people named in this genealogy. Let's just say you were, let's look at verse 11, Zechariah, son of Bebai, and you'd brought with you 28 men of your family to join this group. And so you pull up and you see there's people camped all over the place. And after you've got your own family settled in, then you're like, well, I got to check in with somebody. Where do I go? And people are like, oh, yeah, you go look for all of the carts and the draft horses and the oxen that are pulling them, because there's a guy over there you need to check in with. His name's Ezra. So you, as this Zechariah, you go looking for a place where you see a lot of freight. And of course, you end up at a check-in line. There's a bunch of other people there to check in with you. Maybe you recognize the person ahead of you, and you're like, oh, hey, didn't we used to, when we were kids, you start talking like, oh, but you see a lot of people here, like, oh, yeah, my grandfather went on that first return trip back in the day. Oh, yeah, yeah. How are they? Well, he's passed. Rest in peace. But we've got some family over there, and I'm looking forward to seeing them. They're all standing in line talking, like you do, right? And as you go up, you can hear people at the desk, and they're like, all right, so here's my genealogy. This is where I, fit into the historic tribes of Israel. And your turn comes up and you're okay, well, this is my family, my ancestry here, and I come out of this tribe, and this is how many people I brought with me. And Ezra's like, oh, excellent, check that off, got that. All right, and you're camped over, okay, gotcha. All right, we'll be here for a little bit, but we'll let you know when we're ready to set out. Right, this is kind of what I'm thinking of when I see, right, the sons of Phinehas, Gershom, sons of Ithamar, Daniel, sons of David, Hattush. Right, so the first two are descendant of Aaron, just like Ezra. The next one, of course, descended from David. If you want to look him up, he's in, is it First Chronicles? So yeah, somewhere there's a genealogy in First Chronicles that gives you through the exile for David's family, and he actually shows up as Hattush. And of course, Shechaniah descendants, sons of Parosh, Zechariah, 150 men. So you can kind of get a feel for the range. There are people from all sorts of tribes. You have priests, you have lay people. And the narrative resumes in verse 15, said, I gathered them to the river that runs to Ahava. And there we camped 3 days. And as I reviewed the people and the priests, so he's going through the list of the people who have checked in with him, And he finds he hasn't got any Levites. This is a problem if you're going to support the work of the temple. The Levites were the ones who did, I mean, obviously the priests were handling the sacrifices, but there's a lot of business involved with that. And that was the responsibility of the Levites. And none of them had responded to the call. So Ezra says, I sent for Eleazar, Ariel, Shemaiah, Elnathan, Jarib, Elnathan again, Nathan, Zechariah, Meshullam, leading men for Joiarib and Elnathan. I'm like, wow, there's a lot of Elnathans in this group. But, you know, in my generation, if your name was Heather or Jessica, you know exactly how this feels, right? There's like 2 or 3 of you in every group. But the thing was, these were men of insight, suitable to be sent as messengers, right? So he sends them to somebody named Iddo, the leading man at the place Cassiphia. Now, this is a really intriguing thing because nobody really knows much about this place name, Cassiphia. Well, what we can infer from the text here, that Iddo and his brothers at this place, Cassiphia, had a sort of either a sanctuary or a training ground of sorts where perhaps, maybe, we don't know for sure, in anticipation of the rebuilding of the temple and the return to Jerusalem, they maintained some form of priestly and Levitical community. At any rate, it was a place where they could anticipate finding these Levites they needed. So he sends these men to Iddo at Cassiphia, telling them what to say to Iddo and his brothers and the temple servants at the place Cassiphia, namely, to send us ministers for the house of our God. He is determined he's going to have everything he needs before he leaves. He's a very thorough planner, this Ezra. And here we have that phrase again, by the good hand of our God upon us, they brought us a man of discretion of the sons of Mali, the sons of Levi, son of Israel, namely Sherebiah, with his sons and kinsmen, 18 of them. So that's right, 18, 19. Hashabiah also with him, Jeshaiah of the sons of Merari, with his kinsmen and their sons, 20 of them. It's not exactly an overwhelming response. We have fewer than 40 people who have agreed to come and serve as Levites in the temple. But again, we talked previously about how people had despised the new temple who remembered the old one and considered the new one as a small thing, an insignificant, an inferior thing. But God was the one who said through Zechariah the prophet, don't despise the day of small things. I will work through this. And so we have maybe 40-ish Levites, and of course 220 temple servants, these descendants of people who had been dedicated to the service of the temple but weren't actually descended from Levi. And so Ezra's like, right, we've got what we need now. So he's done the preparation. There's another preparation, 2 more things actually that he needs to do before they can set out. And the first one kind of, I mean, it makes me smile, but it also sort of compels me, because he says, I proclaimed a fast there at the river Ahava, that we might humble ourselves before our God to seek from him a safe journey for ourselves, our children, and all our goods. Now, we're used to this, you know, praying for travel mercies is what we call it. But the reason behind Ezra's prayer is a bit different than ours usually is. You see, he was ashamed to ask the king for a band of soldiers and horsemen to protect us against the enemy on our way, because we had told the king, the hand of our God is for good on all who seek him, and the power of his wrath is against all who forsake him. So really, What they are praying for is less the safety itself as much as it is for God to show himself to be what they have told the king he really is. The safety really is a side effect, sort of a bonus. God showing himself to be who he really is. And so they fast and they implore their God for this. And it says, he listened to our entreaty. We pray for miracles a lot, but we forget that miracles are meant as confirmation of the message of who God is and how he deals with us. And we find out why exactly they may have felt the need for extra protection as we get to verse 24, where he sets apart 12 of the leading priests of his group, Sherebiah, Hashabiah, and 10 of their kinsmen with them, and he allots to each of them his share of the silver, the gold, and the vessels, the offering for the house of the God of our God, that the king and his counselors and his lords and all Israel had offered. And so he weighs out 650 talents of silver, silver vessels worth 200 talents, 100 talents of gold, 20 bowls of gold worth 1,000 derricks, and 2 vessels of fine bright bronze as precious as gold. And this is what they're saying might have weighed up into the tons, right? And this group of people is about to take a, what did they say, 900-mile journey with all of this in their care as their charge from the king to deliver safely in Jerusalem. Yeah, no pressure. And Ezra's encouragement to them is this: you are holy to the Lord. The vessels are holy. Silver and gold are a free will offering to the Lord, the God of your fathers. Guard them and keep them until you weigh them before the chief priests and the Levites and the heads of fathers' houses in Israel at Jerusalem, within the chambers of the house of the Lord. This is their commission. And that takes some integrity, as well as some courage. So these priests and Levites, they take over the weight of the silver and the gold and the vessels. And then it says, then we departed from the river Ahava on the 12th day of the first month to go to Jerusalem. Here we have it again. The hand of our God was on us, and he delivered us from the hand of the enemy and from ambushes by the way. There is so much in that sentence I wish he would have expanded on. Which enemy? What ambushes? He's not telling half a story here. But remember, they're Jews, not the most popular people group in the world. And they are transporting some considerable treasure. And they haven't got any guards, no soldiers. But the hand of God was on them. And they were delivered from every enemy, every attempt at ambush, thievery, anything that would have threatened their journey. But boy, there's so much that could have been told in verse 31. Because verse 32, it says, we came to Jerusalem. It's like, whoops, sudden scene cut, and here we are at Jerusalem. And there we remained 3 days. Probably exhausted. Just, that point where it's just nice not to be moving anymore. But a successful arrival requires, in this case, 3 steps. Step 1, Within the house of our God, the silver and the gold and the vessels were weighed into the hands of Meremoth the priest, son of Uriah, and with him was Eleazar, son of Phinehas, and with them were the Levites, Josabad, the son of Jeshua, Noadiah, son of Bin. So the first thing is we count out, we weigh, and we turn in everything that was entrusted to us for the temple. There's a real weight off, literally and figuratively. And everything's recorded. They have accounted for every last piece. They fulfilled part one of their commission. And then the next thing, of course, those who had come from captivity, the returned exiles, offered burnt offerings to the God of Israel. 12 bulls for all Israel, 96 rams, 77 lambs, and as a sin offering, 12 male goats. All of this was a burnt offering to the Lord. So while you're in the temple and you've just come off a massive journey where God has protected you conspicuously from harm, it would be only natural to offer your sacrifices. You're at the temple at last. You have sin offerings to make. You've got thanksgiving offerings to make. You've been brought through. But this too is obedience to the commission that the king has given Ezra. Remember, what he said was you take this money and you buy bulls, rams, and lambs with their grain offerings and drink offerings and offer them on the altar of the house of your God that's in Jerusalem. Right? So he's already started fulfilling the command, not just bringing in the offerings and giving them over to the priests that are in charge of the temple, but he's also, step 2, he is doing the sacrifices. And then step 3 to a successful arrival, that last bit there. They also delivered the king's commissions to the king's satraps and to the governors of the province beyond the river, and they aided the people and the house of God. Happy ending. Well, for a moment. Because once the business at hand is finished, and you start mingling and you start listening to the people and they talk to you and they tell you how things are going. Well, let's just say if Ezra hadn't already heard any rumors about the people not living up to the holiness of God's chosen people, well, he's about to get told. But that's chapters 9 and 10. That is for next week. So that will be your assignment next week. Read Ezra 9 and 10.